Today's episode is a real treat. My guest is Dr. Jonathan Ripp, the Chief Wellness Officer at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and importantly, the co-founder of CHARM, the Collaborative for Healing and Renewal in Medicine. Dr. Ripp's path into this work began with a deep curiosity about how physicians grow during residency, how their identities form, how meaning develops, and how pressures accumulate over that time. That early focus opened the door to a larger question that many of us are still wrestling with today. What does it take to sustain a career in medicine that feels purposeful and human? There are times in our lives that change the way we see the world. Navigating these challenges can take insight, trusted confidants, or even a coach. Let's explore those moments. In this companion podcast to RX for Success, we will discover ways to learn and write our own success stories together. I'm Dr. Dael Waxman, a physician coach with MD Coaches, and this is Life-Changing Moments. As he followed those questions, CHARM emerged. And what began as a small group of people comparing notes on the struggles they were seeing became something much bigger. CHARM's charter, importantly, helped articulate the principles that now underpin much of today's well-being work, emphasizing structural change, cultivating meaning, and recognizing that resilience is shaped as much by the environment as by the individual. In many ways, it gave language and direction to a movement that was taking shape across the country, and I dare say the world. In our conversation here, Jonathan walks through that journey, how CHARM formed, why its guiding ideas matter now more than ever, and how the contemporary challenges facing healthcare professionals continues to evolve. We also explore what remains constant, the need for connection, clarity of purpose, and systems that support the people at the heart of patient care. Jonathan brings a grounded, thoughtful perspective and a steady, long view to this work. I think you'll find this conversation to be both illuminating and energizing. So, let's dive in. Jonathan Ripp, welcome to Life-Changing Moments.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Well, it's really good to have you. I know it's been a little bit of a process getting you here because you're a busy guy in all the areas that are important to you. For our audience, could you start by sharing just a bit of your professional journey and especially kind of this branch point into physician well-being?
Sure, happy to. And thanks again for the opportunity. So I'm a practicing general internist here in New York City, where I've been the entirety of my career. And I'd go even further. I'm born and bred New Yorker, came to Mount Sinai about over 25 years ago,
Wow.
Where I did my training in internal medicine and have been and remain a practicing general internal medicine physician ever since that time. I got started as a junior faculty member, pretty much right after my training, and became an academic physician and knew that I wanted to identify an area of focus. It felt to me, and I think correctly, that I needed to do that. That's part of what distinguishes academic physicians is having an area of focus. And, I think a lot of people get into physician well-being work, perhaps because of a dramatic personal experience. And certainly I had a lot of dramatic personal experiences, but I don't necessarily consider them all that unique in that what I went through during residency training, residents continue to go through. And at the completion of that, I had this sense that I was a different person than I was going in. What we now, really understand about the identity formation of physicians, and all those drivers that impact their fulfillment or might lead to an erosion of well-being. And so I got interested really from an academic standpoint. I found it fascinating, this transformation that occurred, and wanted to explore it and research it. And there were very few of us doing that 2 decades ago when I got started. And so in many ways, I picked an area at a time when very few people were looking at it, and at a time when it was about to become very interesting to a lot of people, and an area of research that would be blossoming. So that was about 2 decades ago. Then, fast forward to where I am now, my story is really one of slowly expanding scope and influence. And so in those early years, anyone I could find who was doing related work, I connected with, and we began to form these collaborations. And most of those were research collaborations. And then at a certain point, probably 15 years ago, a lot of us were saying, we don't want to just study this problem, we want to do something about it. And that was when these very nascent administrative roles, mine included, began. I started just with a role that attended to the well-being of internal medicine residents here at Mount Sinai. And over time, with increasing recognition and the growth of the literature and attention that was mounting, I then developed a role as an associate dean for GME well-being across our GME, our residents and fellows across that entire enterprise. And then about 8 years ago, I was given this role of Dean for Wellbeing and Resilience and Chief Wellness Officer, and took on a larger administrative role overseeing all the constituents, really, of the School of Medicine: faculty, medical students, research scientists, postdoctoral fellows, and so forth. So that's in a nutshell my journey, but happy to dive in deeper.
So you really evolved, and this is more of a focus on well-being, but if I could for a moment, I want to go back to that main topic that you were first doing academically, which is transformation of residents. Can you just say a little bit about, what was that about back then? Did that then lead to some of the things about transformation have to do with how well we take care of ourselves, or what do you mean by transformation?
Yeah, no, I was really speaking to, sort of that personal, that identity transformation and personal transformation, the growth and emergence of the physician, and really that, the attributes of kind of typical physician personalities, which have a lot of, those typical attributes provide a lot of strength in the care of patients, but they also can be at the heart of some of the challenges around self-care. And I think the culture has evolved dramatically. Anyone who's been in practice for many decades knows that the level of comfort with which we can speak to this, the recognition of the negative outcomes that are associated with lack of attention to the well-being of whether it's a resident or a practicing physician, and now, of course, across multiple healthcare professionals. It's really, I've seen an enormous change in the way in which we talk about it and prioritize it and so forth. But certainly, back then, even when it wasn't being talked about a lot, I personally knew that that the experience had impacted me. That I had a different sense of. I looked at the world a little bit differently. I looked at myself differently, and it was fascinating that the process of training, recognizing that the process of training, had a role in that, was what sparked my research interest and the beginning of this journey.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
So I have a lot of questions about, your role in your current situation. But a main piece of this podcast, I wanted to highlight the CHARM network. And CHARM, for those who don't know, it stands for Collaborative for Healing and Renewal in Medicine. And it is a collaborative. And I wanted to just hear more about that. And for our listeners as well, how did that come together? What are its goals? Say more about it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I kind of hinted at it a little bit when I was speaking to how in those early days, as I was beginning to do some small research studies, there were not a lot of us doing this. And so whenever, one of us would find another one who was maybe studying burnout in residence or looking at well-being in some shape or form, we wanted to, create a community because there are not a lot of us. So that's how CHARM was born. There were several of us engaged in doing some multi-center research studies of resident physicians. And we got to know each other in that regard and through some of the professional societies and where we found each other. And so we really, in a very informal grassroots fashion, said, hey, let's figure out a way that we can meet more regularly and brainstorm, exchange ideas, talk about who's doing what, perhaps engage in collaborative scholarship and so forth. And that was about 15 years ago. Where we've emerged now is that's been a very dedicated community, I think in large part because we really needed each other and really value each other. And so of just about 2 years ago now, as the collaborative was growing dramatically, as more and more folks were connecting through CHARM, we realized we needed to formalize. We needed to incorporate and be a formal organization with bylaws and a board and so forth. And that's precisely what we did. And now we see ourselves really as the professional society for healthcare well-being leaders. So anyone who has a leadership role, however big or small, who's engaged in some level of oversight for the well-being of healthcare workers, and that could be certainly a lot of us started looking at trainees and students and so forth, but really it's any healthcare workers that we now are functioning as a professional society and in many ways meet the needs of the growing group of individuals that have such a role. So we have networks of folks with similar roles that come together every month and exchange ideas, best practices, hear about who's doing what. And we have interest groups that are focused on a lot of the very topical issues that those of us engaged in this work are working on. So there's folks that focus on peer support and coaching and mental health and leadership training. And so a lot of those areas are for those interest groups come together, and the individuals represented there will meet and again exchange ideas. We've generated a fair bit of scholarship now, and we're growing. So I like to think that it's the place where you find your people, who are doing the similar work, much like we needed to do 15 years ago when there were very few of us. Well, now there's a whole movement underway and lots of folks that are doing this work. And so CHARM has it's been a labor of love for me. And I'd like to think that most of the folks that connect through it are really finding their community, finding their folks that they can learn from and support and so forth.
Right. And I'm aware as you're talking that you also have a charter, if I remember correctly. And
Yes.
I've referred to that charter several times, and I've developed some programming. And it strikes me as a nice blueprint for how to, especially if somebody's really new to this, how do I think about well-being and how do I approach this? Can you say a little bit more about that charter and how it came together?
Sure. Yeah, that was an early product of our labors, and speaks to some of the deliverables, if you will, that come out of Charm. But we actually model it. There had been a charter on professionalism in medicine, probably around 2000 or something like that, and so we looked at that and we said, there should be a charter that kind of describes, really captures core principles and focus areas and commitments that can be made to address physician well-being. It's almost a decade old now, I believe, but at the time we hadn't done anything like that, and we felt it important to codify. And so it was really a wonderful process. We had a number of partners. The ACGME was gracious enough to host us in Chicago at their headquarters. And we brought together a number of folks from Charm, as well as representatives from about 20 different professional societies, all of whom convened. And we just had a wonderful day-and-a-half symposium where we didn't know what we were going to get into when we started, but we really emerged with a consensus around some of these principles that we captured and then wrote up and published in JAMA. And now it's a component also of the AMA's Joy in Medicine Recognition Program. So it's part of the application for that award is an acknowledgement of the Charm Charter. So that was an early but really nice example of what came out of our group.
Yeah, that was awesome. Do you have a conference or a meeting that people can attend?
Not as of yet. It's a great question. It's one that our board and community think about a lot. Certainly, we convene quite a lot. What would have been 10 years ago, conference calls. Now, of course, a lot of virtual, calls, Zoom and so forth. And we see each other in person with some frequency at some of the conferences that are common for folks in our space. So the American Conference on Physician Health, which is a joint conference of the AMA, Stanford, and Mayo, is a place where probably there were about 50 or 75 individuals who were maybe 10% or 5 or 10% of the total attendees of that conference were connected through Charm. So it's certainly something that we probably will get to. As you can imagine, it's a pretty big lift to put on an annual conference. And so we want to make sure that when we do it right. But we have had a number of conversations about that, and I would imagine it's coming, but we're able to get a lot done even without it. So we need to be thoughtful in these early days of our sort of formalized organization in terms of where we commit our capacity and bandwidth and how we can have the greatest impact. I suspect that there will be one in the not too distant future, but not at present.
I got it. Well, let me forward. So you are really in the national and maybe even an international discussion around physician well-being, and so. And given your history in working in this arena for such a long time, where are we now compared to where we were as a profession when it comes to physician and other healthcare professional well-being?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of ways to consider answering that question. I'll offer a couple. I think in one respect, and leveraging my vantage, we have made enormous progress in terms of normalizing and prioritizing attention to this issue. So I can speak to a time where there were very few of us talking about this, and it was not a common discussion in healthcare system amongst healthcare system leadership. That is clearly not where we are today. We have clearly advanced to the point where I think you'd be hard-pressed to find any healthcare leader, someone who's involved in senior leadership for a healthcare organization that is not aware of this issue. And so we've definitely, in terms of where we are, we're well past the awareness phase, and we're squarely in the intervention phase. But we're also still at a time where, as a movement, trying to further define ourselves. And one of the unique challenges about well-being is there's so many different elements to it that you get a lot of people very passionate coming together talking about it, but oftentimes they have a different area of focus. For some folks, it may be mental health that really is what's motivating them. For some, it may be that they really are focused on how I as an individual can, optimize my well-being. For others, it's all about leadership and culture of the workplace, and how do you create a healthcare organization where people feel valued and supported and appreciated. And then for others still, it's about work design. How do you design the workplace in a way that enables people to thrive and flourish and get their work done efficiently and effectively? So we're in a phase right now where there's a lot of this discussion happening. There's a lot of interventions underway. There's technological interventions, and AI is playing a role to unload some of the burdens that are driving negative outcomes, or can be leveraged to promote positive outcomes. We are not where I'd like to see us in some, hopefully not too distant future, where we have a very clear understanding of the elements that healthcare systems need to incorporate to account for the well-being of its workforce, that it's clear, that it's prioritized, that there's an understanding how to effectively measure it, and a comprehensive, organized approach for addressing it with solutions that have been, tested and shown to be effective.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now, I have a message for you from our friends at PracticeLink. If you're a physician considering your next career move, whether you're finishing training, relocating, or just ready for something new, make PracticeLink your first stop. PracticeLink is the leading physician job board with tens of thousands of opportunities across every specialty and in every corner of the country. You can search by specialty, location, employer type, and more, so finding the right fit is faster and easier. But PracticeLink offers more than just job listings. Our free resource center is designed specifically for physicians, and it includes expert tips on CV writing, contract negotiation, interview prep, and managing your job search with confidence. Best of all, everything is completely free for physicians. So visit practicelink.com today to explore jobs, connect with employers, and access career resources made just for you. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment, but first, I want to mention a sponsor who has been with us almost since our beginning. Physician Outlook is a splendid publication created for physicians by physicians. Originally a print and online magazine, it's now a dynamic digital-only platform using storytelling, humor, and community building to help physicians and surgeons reconnect with the art of medicine. Physician Outlook celebrates the entire healthcare team, including nurses, nurse practitioners, and PAs who value physician-led care. As artificial intelligence and corporate overreach threatens the human connection, Physician Outlook remains committed to the sacred physician-patient relationship. Beyond storytelling, Physician Outlook takes action on causes that matter. So join the movement, connect, laugh, be inspired. Visit physicianoutlook.com today. And now let's get back to our interview.
I really appreciate you fleshing out these various domains, because this is not a magic bullet kind of solution. It really is a multifactorial approach. Given that, and given what you know, and given your awareness of the literature, what's most exciting to you that you've read lately that seems to be, boy, this is going to make a difference, at least in this domain, and could really have a large impact? What kind of things are exciting to you?
I'll give you one example that relates to work design, and one example that relates to something that an individual can do. And I know that this is, let me start with the individual, because I know this is a group that has some interest in coaching. And I've been really energized and I'm optimistic about just how much data has emerged about the value of coaching. We're really seeing an explosion of its introduction in healthcare. And at many levels, whether it's someone in training or someone in practice. And we're also seeing a growth in the various methodologies and platforms for delivering coaching. And so I'm very optimistic about that. And we certainly have an interest in that here at Mount Sinai. And Charm has a coaching network of folks that are engaged in developing coaching programs at their institutions and they learn from each other. So I'm really excited and enthused by that. And I think there's a lot to be excited about as it relates to work design. And certainly everybody's talking about AI these days, but there's a lot of exciting emerging evidence around how AI tools, particularly those that unload a lot of the clerical burden, particularly writing notes and managing just the influx of data that comes through the electronic health record, that AI is really, there are already models where it's unloading the burden on the clinician. So I'm sure we're going to see, and we're only going to see more of that. I think like any flashy new tool, we have to understand how to use it. We have to make sure we recognize that there may be some unintended consequences of its use, and continue to monitor and not just dive in, with both feet without sort of thinking it through. Nonetheless, I think there's a lot of promise.
Yeah, nice. And I've heard from actually my own family physician uses AI for his notes, and he looks happier than he's been in 20 years. So he says, "This is great. I'm home at 6:00," and he goes, "I've edited my notes, and I leave for home at 6:00. I'm delighted." So
yeah, it's a real game changer. And when you think about it, we got into a real mess with sort of the insidious growth of that clerical burden that really is not the best. We have data on the number of hours that doctors typically spend writing notes, which is just not a great use of their time. So there's a lot of folks are talking about that as a real game changer.
So I'd like it to kind of fast forward even further now. And where would you like to see the field of healthcare professional well-being 5 years from now? Where would you like it to be?
I think I would answer that as it relates to kind of an earlier comment I made, which is I'd like to see greater uptake and consensus or consistency around how large systems address this issue. Because you could take 10 systems right now, and there's going to be there'll be a range in terms of how they address it. Some of which have gone all in and really committed significant resources, and some of which kind of acknowledge it but are not doing a whole lot. So I'd love to see a more uniform commitment, and then also more consistency and consensus around, okay, when we say healthcare worker well-being, what are we talking about here? What are the domains that we're speaking of? Is there a consistent approach? It shouldn't be one size fits all. There are considerations to keep in mind, but there certainly could be greater consistency and coherence around the approach, in keeping with some of those domains that I outlined and the emerging interventions. That's what I'd like to see. I think the challenge of that is, how do you hold organizations accountable? What levers do you use to drive that level of adherence? And it can get a bit thorny in terms of how you think about doing that, carrot versus stick and so forth. But nonetheless, we have to sort of grapple with all that.
So I have a question that kind of gets at it a little bit differently, and you're probably aware of the literature. At least I've seen a questionnaire of practicing physicians who recommend this profession to their children has dropped precipitously over the last 50 years, owing to a lot of the things that your work is trying to help and reverse. So my question is, if somebody came to you and they're considering a career in medicine, they're pre-med, they've already done all that stuff, they're ready to go to medical school, and they said, I know you do a lot of work in well-being. What do I need to look for, and how do I keep myself well through my training and my profession? What would you say?
I love the question. Well, the bit about would you recommend it to a family member? I still firmly believe, as a practicing physician, and I acknowledge that I'm largely an administrator, so I have the luxury of not feeling the same level of burden that very busy full-time clinicians experience. Nonetheless, I practice enough to recognize both the challenges and the joy. And I maintain, and I think most would, that it's a profession where there's a lot of potential for meaning in the work. It's about identifying a work opportunity that allows the balance of your time to be spent more on those activities that for which you derive meaning than those that are meaningless. And so I think that's the trick, and it informs the question, what to look for. I think a young physician looking for a job, first of all, they should take a look at how, what is the organization, perhaps if they're applying to a large organization. What does the organization say about how they're committed to the well-being of the workforce? Are they thinking about these things? Are they engaged in work that addresses this? That says a lot about an organization. And then when you drill down to the specific job, I think if you're looking for a position, to me, it's about the work design and the work culture. Now, it can be hard to tease out what the work culture is. If it's a negative culture and you're looking to apply for a job somewhere, people may not be all that forthcoming, but there's probably ways of at least trying to understand that. That's a little harder to discern than the work design stuff. So, in a couple of years, everyone's going to be using these AI scribes to write notes. They're not all using it right now. So you might want to ask, do they have that? Are they using that? Or what other, tools are in place to address the common volumes of burden, clerical burden, administrative burden? It's going to vary by specialty. Are you a proceduralist? Are you primary care, ambulatory, et cetera? But all that being said, what efforts are underway to unload that clerical burden? Because that's the meaningless stuff, right? No doctor decided they wanted to enter medicine so they could write notes, at 10 o'clock on a Saturday. So to what extent is the place you're looking for work, keeping this in mind, addressing this? And because, to your earlier question, we're at a phase where we actually know some of the things that work. You can ask about whether that's present. I still, if I had to do it over again, I would go into medicine, because I know, even though, part of that transformation as a resident, which, perhaps I was suggesting is somewhat negative, but part of it is, I feel enormously privileged to practice as a physician. And I think that will always remain when you're engaged in the care of others who are in need. There will always be a lot of meaning.
Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know as we close down here that I have not asked you about?
Yeah. Before I answer, I'll just one last comment on the thread of discussion that immediately preceded. You may be familiar, but there was this study that showed that engaging in spending 20% of your time in the activity most meaningful to you was associated with less burnout. So what's interesting there is it's not 50% where it has to be the majority. Physicians, even if a fifth of their time is spent on the thing that's most meaningful, that's kind of enough to carry them through the less meaningful stuff. But I'd like to think it would be more than 20%. And I love that how the coaching framework can help with that.
When I saw that, I went, really? We're supposed to settle for 20%? I mean, that's crazy.
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly. And no, the answer is we're not supposed to settle for 20%. Yeah. It's not like the goal here is to eliminate all burdensome tasks or clerical tasks.
Right, of course.
That's inevitable. And so we need to recognize that that's part of that. It's just the balance.
Yeah.
In terms of, final thoughts, What I would say, a lot of times what people will hear me talk about these sort of robust, large organizational efforts and say, well, it's great that you're doing that, but at my organization, we don't have any of this stuff, or we don't have the resources. The way I do try to encourage folks in response to that is I usually say something like, I've been doing this for 25 years. So the work requires perseverance and grit. We're talking in large part about changing cultures, which takes time. But there's reason for optimism. You can find lots of people doing this work now that there's a huge community, whether it be through Charm or other networks. There's a lot of folks that are doing this. And so, that's what I would say to people listening is if you have an interest, you can find opportunities to pursue that interest, whether it's through the AMA or the National Academy or the American Hospitals Association, the Lorna Breen Foundation, Charm. There's many folks that are doing this work, and so kind of setting the path for you. So I'm excited for the next generation of healthcare well-being leaders to engage, and I hope I'm speaking to some of you today.
Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and for your role in not only changing your local culture, but changing the national culture. And more power to you as you proceed ahead with you and all the collaborators in Charm. I really appreciate your taking the time to be with us today, and thank you again.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Changing Moments. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to rate us 5 stars and leave a review. Doing so helps our podcast reach more listeners. Have something to share? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Visit the MD Coaches community on Facebook groups. This dynamic virtual space is a place to continue discussion about life-changing moments and perhaps share some life-changing moments of your own. Join the conversation today.